It started the way all ordinary things do, with a favor. My name's Ethan. I'm 25. I work part-time at a local grocery store just outside Portland while finishing up my IT certification. Not the most exciting life, but it's stable. I don't mind routine. I keep to myself, help my neighbors, and avoid anything too complicated. At least I used to. One Wednesday afternoon, I was just finishing my shift, stacking the last few crates of bottled water into the walk-in fridge, when Mark, one of my coworkers, tapped me on the shoulder. "Hey man, random question. You remember my mom, right?" I blinked. Yeah, from that time she picked you up during the snowstorm? Subaru, right?" He laughed. "Exactly. She's got a sprained ankle now, can't drive for a bit. She asked if someone could bring her groceries this week. She even offered to tip." I shrugged. "Yeah, sure. I don't mind. I'm not in a rush today." He handed me a paper bag filled with organic produce, almond milk, some kind of fancy tea, and a couple of other things. "That's the one. Address is on the side. Her name's Dana." I knew that already. Mark and I weren't super close, but we'd hung out a few times during college. I'd been to his place once or twice. His mom, Dana, was polite, reserved, the kind of woman who always seemed like she had something quietly on her mind. She wasn't flashy. She didn't try to be noticed, but something about her always had a presence. Maybe it was the way she spoke softly but with intention, or the way her eyes seemed like they'd seen a little too much of life. 15 minutes later, I pulled up to her house. A 2-story cottage tucked behind tall hedges, the kind with ivy creeping along the porch railings and a wind chime that danced gently in the breeze. I carried the bag up to the door and knocked twice. She opened it slower than I expected. Her hair was up in a messy knot, a few strands loose and catching the light. She wore a soft cream-colored cardigan over a faded t-shirt and yoga pants. No makeup. Still, there was something quietly elegant about her, like she belonged in a different decade. "Ethan," she said with a small smile. "I thought it might be you." "Hey, Ms. Lawson, Dana." I corrected myself. "Got your groceries." "Thank you." I didn't think Mark would actually follow through. "Come in. I've got the door propped." I hesitated a second, then stepped inside. The place smelled faintly of rosemary and lemon cleaner. It was cozy, lived in, bookshelves in every corner, warm wooden floors, windows cracked just enough to let the breeze play with the curtains. I set the bag on the kitchen counter. "Need anything else?" She tilted her head, studying me for a moment. "Actually, would you stay for a minute? I made tea. And it's been a quiet day." The way she said it, casual, almost offhand, didn't feel loaded. But something about it made my chest tighten just a little. I nodded. "Sure. 1 minute." I sat at the edge of the bar stool while she poured 2 cups. Her limp was subtle, but I noticed it as she crossed the kitchen. "You can sit," she said with a quiet laugh, seeing how stiff I was. "I'm not a school principal." That broke the ice a little. We sat across from each other, the tea steaming between us. She sipped hers slowly, with both hands wrapped around the mug like it was the only warm thing left in the world. "I hate asking for help," she said after a moment. "I've always been independent. Mark gets that from me. But this ankle, it's been humbling." I smiled gently. "Doesn't hurt to lean on people once in a while." Her eyes met mine just for a second longer than they needed to. "I suppose not, though I'm not very good at it." She asked about work, about my studies. I told her about my certification, how I wanted to do cybersecurity someday, how the pay at the store wasn't much, but the free bananas weren't bad. She laughed, and it wasn't a polite laugh. It was honest. I noticed little things. The faint crease at the corner of her lips when she smiled. The way her voice dipped lower when she was thoughtful. The ring on her finger gone. I remembered Mark saying she'd divorced a few years ago, but I never asked why. As I stood to leave, mug still warm in my hand, she surprised me again. "I don't get much company these days," she said, not quite looking at me. "You're easy to talk to, Ethan." I paused. "I'm glad to be here." She nodded. Then her hand brushed mine as she took the mug. It was a small touch, nothing dramatic, but I felt it for the rest of the day. When I got home that night, I couldn't stop thinking about the way she said, "Stay for a minute," like she'd been waiting to say it to someone for a long time. And like maybe, just maybe, I was the first person who stayed. I went back 2 days later. Not because she asked. Not because I had to. But because I wanted to. I told myself I was just checking in, seeing if she needed anything else while her ankle healed. But deep down, I knew that wasn't all it was. She opened the door quicker this time, like she'd been nearby. Her hair was down, loosely falling over her shoulders. She wore a navy blue sweater and soft joggers. Still barefoot. "Ethan," she said, voice softer than last time. "Hi." "Hey," I said. "I was just nearby. Wanted to check if you needed anything." A pause. Then, "Come in." The way she said it was different this time. Not casual. Not hesitant. Just open. Inside, the house was filled with low light. A candle burned near the kitchen window. The breeze had picked up again, and wind stirred the curtains gently. She had music playing, something soft, piano, almost cinematic. "No groceries today," she smiled. "But I did make banana bread." She said it like a peace offering. We sat in the small dining area. The lights dimmed low, banana bread between us, still warm. She poured tea again, same mugs as before, and we ate mostly in silence at first. But it wasn't awkward. It was calm. "You always this quiet?" she asked after a few minutes. I smiled. "Only when I'm listening." That made her laugh. She leaned back slightly in her chair. "You're not like most of the guys Mark hangs out with." Not sure if that's good or bad. "Oh, it's good," she said quickly. "They're loud. Boys still trying to be men. You're different." I looked at her, studying the lines on her face. Not from age, but from emotion. She looked tired, but beautiful in a way that didn't ask for attention. She caught me looking but didn't look away. "You always been like this?" I asked. She raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "I don't know, calm, collected, strong, I guess." Something shifted in her expression. She looked down at her mug. "Not always. Most of the time, I'm just pretending." There was silence after that. Not uncomfortable, just real. She told me about how she used to be a dancer when she was younger. How she'd given it up when Mark was born. How her ex-husband never really saw her after that. Just the role she played. Mom, cook, housekeeper. "I think people forget," she said quietly, "that women want to be seen too, not just needed. Seen." Her voice was even, but her eyes shimmered. I didn't know what to say, so I just said the truth. "I see you." She froze for a moment, then blinked slowly. Her lips parted like she might say something, but she didn't. She just looked at me, really looked, and that silence between us got heavier. Not awkward, not sad, just full. We didn't touch. We didn't move closer, but something invisible passed between us. undeniable. After a while, I stood to leave. Thanks for the banana bread. She walked me to the door. You're welcome. I paused on the porch, not quite ready to turn away. If you need anything else, just text me. Or call. I might, she said. If that's okay. It is. She nodded, then hesitated. You're easy to be around, Ethan. So are you. I left, heart buzzing, mind racing. Nothing had happened, not in the way people usually mean. But in another way, everything had changed. The next week became a blur of small visits. I stopped by every other evening. Sometimes I brought groceries, sometimes not. Sometimes she cooked. Other times we just sat. She never made it feel strange, never overstepped. But the air between us stayed charged, gently, persistently. She started wearing softer clothes around me, long sweaters, loose tops that fell just right over her frame. Nothing inappropriate, just effortless. And sometimes, when she reached for something or laughed too long, I caught myself staring. And she noticed. One evening, I was helping her water the plants near the back patio. She bent over to adjust the hose, and the fabric of her dress shifted just enough to make me look away. Too fast. She turned, caught my reaction, and smiled to herself, saying nothing. Later that night, as I dried the dishes, she stood next to me, brushing past gently as she reached for a towel. Her arm lingered against mine a beat longer than it needed to. She said nothing. I didn't pull away. We were dancing around something unspoken, both of us feeling it, neither of us naming it. And maybe that was what made it feel so real. One night it rained. Heavy, endless rain. I was already soaked when I got to her porch. I hadn't even planned to come. I just ended up there. Like instinct, she opened the door in a robe. Thick, dark blue, tied at the waist. Her hair was damp, her face flushed with surprise. Ethan, you're soaked. Yeah, I know. I don't know why I came. She looked at me for a long second, then said softly, I'm glad you did. She let me in, handed me a towel, told me to sit by the fire. I did. The crackling warmth filled the silence. She disappeared briefly, then came back in dry clothes. Still the robe, but now her hair was brushed and she carried 2 mugs of cocoa. We didn't say much that night, just sat on the couch, listening to the rain. At one point, she rested her head on the back cushion and looked over at me, her voice barely a whisper. Do you ever feel like you're waiting for something, and you don't even know what? I turned to her. All the time. She nodded. Me too. That was the closest we came to a confession. And maybe that's all we needed for now. But I knew something was changing. I saw it in the way she walked barefoot across the wooden floor. I felt it in the pause between her sentences. I heard it in the way she said my name. The line between us wasn't crossed yet, but we were both standing on it. And neither of us wanted to step away. It was a Thursday night when everything shifted. The visits had become natural by then, part of our rhythm. I'd stop by after work, we'd talk, sometimes eat, sometimes just sit in silence. There were no expectations, no pressure. But that night felt different the moment I stepped inside. The lights were lower than usual. Only the lamp by the bookshelf was on, casting a soft golden glow over the living room. The windows were open just a crack, letting in a warm breeze that carried the faintest scent of honeysuckle. A record was playing, something slow, jazzy, the kind of music that floats more than it plays. She stood in the doorway to the kitchen, drying her hands with a dish towel. She was barefoot again, wearing loose gray sweatpants and a white off-the-shoulder sweatshirt that fell gently along her collarbone. Her hair was down, waves slightly messy, like she'd just pulled out a hair tie. "Hey," she said, smiling. "You hungry?" I nodded. "Always." Dinner was quiet, stir-fry and rice, wine instead of tea. We didn't talk about much, but there was a softness to her voice that night, a rhythm to the conversation that felt slower, more intentional. She laughed at one of my dumb stories, and when I leaned forward to mimic a part of it, she reached across and lightly touched my hand. Her fingers lingered. I looked up. She didn't pull away. We stared at each other for a second longer than we should have. Then she gently drew her hand back and stood up, collecting the plates. As I helped her rinse the dishes, she glanced at me sideways. "You don't have to leave right away tonight," she said. "I wasn't planning to." Another pause, another look. Then she handed me the towel, and our fingers brushed again. And this time, neither of us moved. Later, we ended up in the living room, sitting side by side on the couch. Not too close, but not far enough to feel casual. The record had stopped, and the only sound was the ticking of the small clock on the wall. She looked at me, not with a smile, not with sadness, just open, vulnerable. And then she said it. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why do you keep coming back?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" "You've helped more than enough. You're not here for groceries anymore." I swallowed. "No, I'm not." She nodded, slowly. Her gaze drifted to the window. "You're young. You could be anywhere else. With anyone else. I'm here." Her eyes turned back to mine. "I notice you," I added quietly. She looked down, exhaled slowly, then whispered, "That means more than you know." Silence stretched again, but this time it was full of electricity, of choices. "I shouldn't be feeling this," she said, almost to herself. "But I do." I leaned in slightly, just enough to let her see I wasn't running. "Me too." She closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them again, they were softer, sadder, but full of something unspoken. "You make me feel seen, Ethan," she whispered. "Like I'm more than what I've become." I didn't think. I didn't calculate. I just reached out, slowly, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. My hand brushed her cheek, and her eyes fluttered shut. When they opened again, we were closer. "I don't want to ruin anything," she said. "You're not." She leaned in first. Our lips met, soft, uncertain, warm. It wasn't hungry or desperate. It was gentle, curious, like we were asking permission with every second. When we pulled apart, neither of us spoke. She rested her forehead lightly against mine, and we sat like that, breathing together. Then she stood. "I should," she began, then trailed off. "Yeah," I said. "I should go." She nodded, but didn't move toward the door. Instead, she walked with me slowly. At the threshold, she looked up at me again. "You okay?" I asked. She gave me a small, crooked smile. "I haven't felt this alive in a long time." I nodded. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Dana." I didn't sleep much that night. My mind replayed every second. Her voice, her scent, the warmth of her breath just before the kiss. I knew we'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross. And yet, I didn't regret it. Not for a moment. The next few days were different. Not in a bad way, just heavier. More real. I didn't stop visiting. She didn't ask me not to. But we both knew something had changed. There was a new kind of silence between us. Not cold, but full of weight, of awareness. One morning, she texted me, "I'm making breakfast. If you're free." That was it. I showed up an hour later. She opened the door in a simple gray t-shirt and shorts. No makeup. Hair messy. Beautiful. We didn't kiss. We didn't even touch. But the way she looked at me said everything. That day, I helped her fix a loose hinge on a cabinet. We talked about nothing important. And yet, everything felt important now. Later, as I was leaving, she stood by the door and whispered, "I don't know where this is going." I nodded. "Me neither. But I don't want it to stop." "Then it doesn't have to." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about her laugh, about how good it felt to be the one she reached out to, about how I wasn't just delivering groceries anymore. I was delivering something else entirely, and I had no idea what it might cost. I wish I could say the hardest part was the beginning. The kiss, the first time I touched her cheek, the first moment we admitted we saw each other differently. But it wasn't. The hardest part came later. It came when the world started noticing. Not people exactly, not yet, but reality. That creeping voice in the background. That sense that something beautiful might be too fragile to survive in the open air. Started small. Mark mentioned he might swing by his mom's more often to help her out. "I've been busy," he said, "but she's been alone too much lately." I nodded like it didn't hit me in the stomach. Then, one Saturday afternoon, I was over fixing a loose drawer in the hallway. Dana had made iced tea, her hair pinned back, tank top clinging slightly in the summer heat. The radio played something soft. We were alone. I'd just finished the drawer when I turned and saw her leaning against the wall, watching me. "You're good with your hands," she said, voice barely louder than the hum of the fan. I smiled. "You've said that before." "Because it's true." She stepped forward. We didn't speak again for a while. That time, we didn't stop at a kiss. We didn't question it. We didn't hold back. It wasn't rushed or reckless. It was quiet and slow, like we both needed something only the other could offer. Afterward, we lay on her bed, tangled in sheets and silence. I traced lazy circles on her back while she stared at the ceiling. "I should feel bad," she said. "Do you?" She paused. "No," she whispered, "and that scares me." I kissed her shoulder. "Me too." We weren't reckless. We were careful. But the problem with something that feels right is that you start believing you're untouchable. She started leaving the door unlocked when she knew I was coming. I stopped texting before I came over. I just arrived. We moved like we belonged in the same room, like I'd always been part of her home. She played music while she cooked. I read on the couch with her feet in my lap. We talked about everything. Regrets, childhood, music, people who hurt us, people who left. She told me things she hadn't told anyone in years. I did the same. And then one night everything cracked. It was late, past midnight. I was walking to my car when headlights swept over the street. I froze. It was Mark. I ducked low beside a neighbor's hedge, heart pounding so loud I was sure someone could hear it. He parked a few houses down, got out, went into a friend's house. But that moment shattered something. When I turned back to look at her window, the curtains shifted slightly. I knew she was watching. We both knew the bubble had popped. The next morning, she texted, "We need to be more careful." Careful became distance. She stopped initiating. I stopped staying late. We acted like nothing had changed, but everything had. Our moments became shorter, her laughter more restrained, the touches less frequent. And then one evening I came by with groceries. She opened the door, her face unreadable. "Mark's here," she whispered. "Oh, he wanted to cook for me. I didn't know he was coming." I nodded. "I'll just drop these off." She took the bag. Our fingers brushed, but she pulled away too fast. "Thanks," she said. "Yeah, anytime." I turned to leave, and just as I reached the steps, she called softly, "Ethan." I looked back. There was something in her eyes, a question, a sadness, a goodbye. But she didn't say it. Neither did I. I walked to my car, didn't look back again. Weeks passed. We texted occasionally, polite, distant. I stopped visiting. She stopped inviting. But I saw her sometimes in town, at the store, once at the farmer's market. Always alone, always beautiful. She'd wave. I'd wave back. Nothing more. One rainy night, long after the silence between us had settled into something permanent, I got a message. I still think about that night. The one when you fixed the drawer. I stared at it for a long time, then replied, "Me too." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Now I pass her house sometimes. I still know what her porch light looks like when it's left on just for me. I still remember how her voice sounded in the quiet, how her touch lingered longer than it should have. And sometimes, when the world is quiet and I'm alone with my thoughts, I think about that day I showed up with a bag of groceries and she said, "Stay for a minute," and how I stayed for so much more. Even now, I think a part of me is still there, sitting at her table, hearing her laugh, and remembering what it felt like to be seen.